For 3 centuries, humanity had been the galaxy's punching bag, dismissed as primitive meat sacks, denied basic rights, and treated like exotic pets by the Galactic Council's superior species. Every insult, every slight, every casual act of cosmic racism had been carefully catalogued in human memory banks. The Council thought silence meant submission. They were about to learn the difference between a species that couldn't fight back and a species that was simply choosing not to. Yet, the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council station hummed with the usual mixture of translated voices, each species contributing to the cacophony of cosmic politics. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the corridors with measured steps, her black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the rainbow of alien forms that towered, slithered, and floated around her. At 5 feet 6 inches, she was dwarfed by nearly every other representative present, but her spine remained straight, her expression neutral. "Look, the pet humans brought their little speaker again," chittered Vextai, the insectoid representative from the Hive Collective. His mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. The translation device hanging from Sarah's ear converted his chemical signals into mocking laughter. Sarah didn't react. She'd heard worse. Much worse. The council chamber was a massive amphitheater carved from a single asteroid, its walls embedded with viewing screens showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. Representatives sat in species-specific environmental pods arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. The human delegation occupied the smallest pod in the outermost ring, a position that said everything about humanity's status in galactic society. "The session will now commence," announced arbitrator Calthara, a majestic being of pure energy contained within a geometric crystal matrix. The ethereals had overseen galactic governance for millennia, their supposed wisdom and impartiality making them natural mediators. Today's primary agenda involves the final ratification of Resource Allocation Treaty 7341. Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She'd been fighting this treaty for 8 months, watching it grow more punitive with each revision. The latest version would strip Earth of its remaining mining rights in the Sol system, redistribute human colony worlds to more suitable species, and impose quotas on human reproduction across all territories. Before we proceed to the final vote, Kelthara continued, we shall hear final statements from affected parties. Representative Gorthal of the Hegemony Coalition will speak first. The massive reptilian being rose from his environmental pod, his scales shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that conveyed authority and contempt in equal measure. At 12 feet tall and built like a living tank, Gorthal embodied everything the galaxy respected: raw physical power, ancient civilization, and the casual cruelty of an apex predator. Esteemed Council, Gorthal's voice boomed through the chamber, the Hegemony Coalition has been patient with the human infestation for far too long. These creatures breed like parasites, consume resources at unsustainable rates, and contribute nothing of value to galactic civilization. They possess no unique technologies, no artistic achievements worth preserving, and no philosophical insights that haven't been better expressed by superior species eons ago. A wave of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian's crystalline forms chimed in harmonic approval. The collective's drones buzzed their assent. Even the normally peaceful Verdani rustled their leafy appendages in agreement. The humans had their chance to prove themselves worthy of membership in our great community, Gorthal continued, his yellow eyes fixed on Sarah's still form. Instead, they've shown us nothing but mediocrity wrapped in primitive emotion. They cling to concepts like individual rights and cultural preservation as if their backward civilization deserves the same respect as our advanced societies. Sarah's hands remained folded in her lap, but her knuckles had gone white. She thought of the files hidden in her diplomatic pouch, 3 centuries of carefully documented evidence that most of these superior species had built their civilizations on technologies they'd stolen, philosophies they'd plagiarized, or achievements they'd claimed after exterminating the actual innovators. The treaty before us today is not punishment, Gorthal's voice dripped with false magnanimity. It is mercy. We offer the humans a chance to serve their betters, to find purpose as laborers and servants in a galaxy they could never hope to understand or improve. Better this than the alternative, complete exile to their insignificant home world, cut off from the galactic community forever. The chamber erupted in approval. Representatives clicked, buzzed, chimed, and roared their agreement. Sarah noticed that none of them bothered to look at her during the demonstration. To them, she wasn't even worth acknowledging. Arbitrator Kelthara's crystal matrix pulsed with official authority. The Council recognizes Ambassador Chen of the Human Colonial Union for her final statement. You have 3 minutes. Sarah stood slowly, feeling the weight of 1,000 contemptuous gazes. She walked to the central speaking platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. The silence felt different than usual, expectant, hungry. They were waiting for her to beg, to plead for mercy, to provide one final bit of entertainment before humanity's rights were stripped away forever. Instead, she simply stood at the podium and smiled. Honored representatives, she began, her voice calm and clear, I want to thank you all for this opportunity to address the Council one final time. Over the past 8 months, I've presented evidence of humanity's contributions to galactic society. I've documented our scientific achievements, our cultural exports, our peaceful coexistence with other species. I've appealed to your sense of justice, your commitment to the founding principles of this council. She paused, her smile never wavering. I realize now that I was wasting everyone's time. You've already made your decision, haven't you? Not based on evidence or justice, but on something much simpler, you don't like us. We make you uncomfortable. We remind you of things you'd rather forget. A few representatives shifted uneasily. The ethereal arbitrator's matrix flickered with what might have been annoyance. So I'm not going to plead with you today, Sarah continued. I'm not going to present new evidence or make passionate appeals. Instead, I'm going to give you exactly what you want, human silence. We're done talking. We're done appealing to your better natures. We're done pretending that logic and evidence matter in these chambers. The silence in the chamber had changed quality again. Now it felt dangerous. The human delegation withdraws all objections to Treaty 7341. Vote however you wish. Do whatever you think is best for the galaxy. We'll be very quiet from now on. Sarah turned and walked back to her pod without another word. The representatives looked confused, as if they'd been expecting more drama, more emotion, more of the human weakness they'd grown accustomed to mocking. Arbitrator Kelthara's matrix pulsed with bureaucratic efficiency. Very well. The Council will now vote on the ratification of Resource Allocation Treaty 7341. All in favor? The vote was unanimous, as everyone had known it would be. Every species raised their appendage, tentacle, or energy field in support. Even the traditionally neutral observers cast their votes in favor of the treaty. The measure passes, Kelthara announced. Treaty 7341 is hereby ratified and will take effect in 72 standard hours. The human territories listed in Section 12 will be redistributed according to the allocation guidelines. Human colonial populations will be relocated to designated settlement zones. Questions regarding implementation should be directed to the Hegemony Coalition, who will oversee the transition. Sarah gathered her materials methodically, placing each document in her diplomatic case with the same care she'd used to prepare them. Her aide, a young man named Marcus Webb, leaned close enough to whisper without being overheard. Ma'am, shouldn't we file an emergency appeal? Contact the Earth Assembly? Something? Sarah's smile had never left her face, but now it held an edge that made Marcus take a step back. No appeals, Marcus. No protests. No emergency sessions. We're going to be very, very quiet. As they left the chamber, Sarah could feel the satisfaction radiating from the other delegations. They'd finally put humanity in its place. The troublesome upstarts who dared to demand equal treatment had been properly humbled. The galaxy could return to its natural order, with the strong ruling over the weak and everyone knowing their proper place in the cosmic hierarchy. What none of them noticed was the small smile that never left Sarah's face as she walked through the corridors. Or the way she stopped at exactly 7 communication terminals along her route, each time entering a brief, encrypted message before moving on. Or the fact that her diplomatic immunity gave her access to the station's quantum communication array, where she sent a single, one-word message to a classified address on Earth. Proceed. 3 hours later, Sarah was aboard her transport ship, watching the Council station shrink in the viewport as they accelerated toward the hyperspace jump point. Marcus sat across from her, still looking shell-shocked by the day's events. "I don't understand, Ambassador," he said finally. "Why didn't we fight harder?" The evidence was solid. We had documentation of their hypocrisy, proof that half their so-called achievements were stolen from extinct species. We could have exposed them. Sarah opened her diplomatic case and withdrew a sealed folder marked with classification codes that made Marcus's eyes widen. Inside were photographs, technical schematics, and intelligence reports that painted a very different picture of humanity's place in the galaxy. "Marcus, do you know what the difference is between a species that can't fight back and a species that chooses not to fight?" The young age shook his head. "Time," Sarah replied. "A species that can't fight back gets stronger. A species that chooses not to fight gets patient. We've been very patient, Marcus. Very, very patient." She handed him a photograph showing a sleek, angular spacecraft unlike anything in the current galactic fleet. The design was clearly human, but the technology visible in the image was decades ahead of anything officially acknowledged by Earth's government. "Project Prometheus has been running for 97 years, Sarah explained. Every insult, every slight, every casual act of racism from the Council has been funding authorization for another Black Ops research facility. Every time they've denied us access to their technology, our best minds have been working to develop something better. Every time they've called us primitive, we've been reverse engineering their equipment and improving on it." Marcus stared at the photograph's images of massive shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, of weapons that bent spacetime itself, of defensive systems that made the Council's vaunted fleet look like toys. "We've been playing the long game, Marcus. While they've been focused on keeping us down, we've been preparing for the day they pushed too far. That day was today." The transport ship's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Sarah activated the holographic display, revealing the image of Admiral Helena Cross, commander of Earth's hidden fleet. The woman's weathered face was grim but satisfied. "Ambassador Chen, we've received your authorization. Operation Silent Thunder is now active. All Council monitoring stations in human space have gone dark. Their spy networks have been rolled up. Their assets have been neutralized. And their fleet, well, let's just say they're going to have some very interesting surprises waiting for them when they arrive to enforce their treaty." Sarah nodded. "Status of the colonies? All 37 worlds have activated their defense grids. The hegemony forces that were pre-positioned for the takeover have been dealt with. Quietly. We're maintaining communication blackouts as ordered. Let them think we're just accepting this quietly." "Excellent. Phase 2? Admiral Cross's smile was predatory. "The gift packages have been delivered to every Council member species' home system. They won't activate for another 48 hours, but when they do." She paused. "Ma'am, are you sure about this? Once we cross this line, there's no going back to the way things were." Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking of 3 centuries of humiliation, of being called primitive by species who'd never innovated anything themselves, of watching human children grow up believing they were somehow inferior to beings who couldn't even grasp basic concepts of individual rights or creative thinking. "Admiral, the way things were wasn't working for us. It's time for the galaxy to learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah and Marcus alone in the small cabin. Outside, the stars began to shift and blur as the ship entered hyperspace, carrying them back to a Earth that was no longer the backward, defenseless world the Council believed it to be. "What happens now?" Marcus asked quietly. Sarah's smile had evolved into something that would have made even Gorthal nervous. "Now we wait 48 hours. Then, the galaxy learns that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous." Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the ESV Retribution, humanity's first true dreadnought, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Around her, the command crew worked with practiced efficiency, their voices calm despite the magnitude of what they were about to unleash. Through the main viewport, the blue-white star of the hegemony home system cast harsh shadows across the ship's angular hull.
Admiral, all stealth ships report ready, Commander Torres announced from the tactical station.
The Hegemony fleet is exactly where intelligence predicted: 47 heavy cruisers, 93 destroyers, and their flagship Dominator positioned in standard orbital defense pattern around Gorth Prime. Cross nodded, her weathered hands clasped behind her back. At 68, she was old enough to remember the early days of human contact with the galactic community, the hope, the excitement, the crushing disappointment when humanity realized they were viewed as little more than curiosities by their supposed equals.
She'd spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. Status on the gift packages?
Deployed and active across all Council member systems, reported Lieutenant Park from the intelligence station. Nanoscale surveillance drones, quantum communication disruptors, and the special surprises are all in position.
They still don't know we're here.
The gift packages had been humanity's masterpiece of covert warfare. For decades, seemingly innocent trade goods, cultural exchanges, and diplomatic presence had carried microscopic payloads that had quietly integrated themselves into the infrastructure of every Council member world.
Art pieces that contained dormant AI systems.
Cultural artifacts with embedded quantum computers.
Food shipments that had introduced self-replicating nanotechnology into entire ecosystems.
The Council had been so confident in their technological superiority that they'd never bothered to thoroughly scan the primitive human gifts.
Why would they?
Everyone knew humans were centuries behind in nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and quantum mechanics.
Everyone was wrong. Time until the ultimatum expires? Cross asked. 37 minutes, Admiral.
Cross allowed herself a thin smile.
12 hours earlier, every major news network in Council space had received an identical message.
The transmission had appeared simultaneously on every screen, every communication device, every information system throughout the galaxy. The source had been untraceable, the signal impossible to block or intercept. The message had been simple. Ambassador Chen's face had appeared, still wearing that same calm smile she'd displayed in the Council chambers, and delivered humanity's ultimatum in perfectly measured tones. To the members of the Galactic Council. You have 48 hours to reverse Treaty 7341, restore all human territories to their previous status, and issue formal apologies to the Human Colonial Union for 3 centuries of systematic discrimination. In addition, the current Council leadership will resign and submit to an independent investigation of their corruption and abuse of power. If these terms are not met within the specified timeframe, humanity will be forced to take alternative action to secure our people's rights and safety.
You have been warned.
The reaction had been immediate and predictable.
Gorthal had called an emergency session to denounce the terrorist threats of the human delegation. The Hive Collective had dispatched their battle swarms to human space.
The ethereal arbitrators had declared martial law and activated the Council's ancient defense protocols.
None of them had taken the ultimatum seriously. After all, what could the humans actually do?
Their official fleet consisted of 30 outdated patrol ships and a handful of converted merchant vessels. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. Their military was laughably small compared to the vast armadas controlled by the Council members.
They were about to learn how much they didn't know about their inferior neighbors. Admiral, we're receiving a quantum burst transmission from Earth, Lieutenant Park announced. It's Admiral Morrison from High Command.
The holographic display activated, revealing the stern face of Admiral Victoria Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs and one of the few people who knew the full extent of humanity's hidden capabilities. Her silver hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her expression carried the weight of the decision they were all about to live with. Helena, you have final authorization for Operation Silent Thunder. The Council rejected our ultimatum 3 hours ago. They've reinforced their fleets and are currently en route to human space to enforce their treaty. They still believe they're dealing with the same species they've been pushing around for 3 centuries. Cross felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest.
Understood, Admiral. We're ready to proceed. Remember, Helena, this isn't about conquest or revenge. It's about changing the fundamental power structure of the galaxy. After today, no species will ever again assume they can oppress others simply because they believe themselves superior. Make sure that message is understood. Yes, ma'am. We'll be very clear in our communication. Morrison nodded. God help us all. Execute Operation Silent Thunder. Morrison out.
The transmission ended, leaving Cross alone with the weight of history. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders that would change everything. She thought of the human children growing up on 37 worlds, believing themselves somehow inferior to beings who had never created anything more sophisticated than new ways to exploit those weaker than themselves. She thought of Ambassador Chen's diplomatic smile, maintained through countless insults and casual cruelties. She thought of 3 centuries of patience finally running out. All stations, this is Admiral Cross. We are now at Condition 1. Target the Hegemony flagship Dominator for our opening demonstration. I want their entire command structure to understand exactly what they've awakened. I, Admiral, Commander Torres responded. Quantum disruptors charging. Singularity torpedoes armed. Stealth field maintaining at full integrity. The retribution was invisible to every sensor system the Council possessed, its hull wrapped in technology that bent spacetime around the ship itself. To any observer, the area of space they occupied simply didn't exist. The technology had been derived from captured ethereal artifacts, then improved with human engineering until it surpassed the original by orders of magnitude. Admiral, we're receiving desperate transmissions from the Hegemony fleet, Lieutenant Park reported. They're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout their system, but they can't locate the source. Their flagship is trying to implement evasive maneuvers. Cross watched the tactical display as red dots representing the Hegemony fleet began to scatter in panic. They could sense something was wrong, their instruments were screaming warnings about spatial distortions and quantum fluctuations, but they had no idea what they were facing. Target locked on the Dominator, Admiral. We have a clean shot. Fire. The Retribution's primary weapon was a marvel of human engineering, combining principles stolen from a dozen different Council species and improved with humanity's unique talent for turning defensive technologies into instruments of war. The Singularity torpedo didn't travel through space, it folded space around itself, appearing instantly at its target regardless of distance or defensive measures. The Dominator, Gorthal's personal flagship and the pride of the Hegemony fleet, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons and armor. The next moment, there was a brief flash of exotic radiation and a small, perfectly spherical void in space where 12,000 Hegemony warriors had been. The silence on the Hegemony communication channels lasted exactly 3 seconds before chaos erupted. Panic, confusion, and desperate demands for information flooded the network as the most powerful ship in their fleet vanished without warning or explanation. Admiral, the Hegemony fleet is attempting to retreat to hyperspace, Commander Torres reported. Should we pursue? Negative. Let them run. They'll carry word of what they've seen back to the Council. That's part of the message. Cross activated the ship's communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies used by Council forces. Her image appeared on every screen throughout the Hegemony system, from the smallest patrol boat to the orbital defense platforms surrounding their homeworld. This is Admiral Helena Cross of the Human Colonial Defense Force. The ship you just witnessed destroyed was the Dominator, flagship of a species that believed themselves superior to humanity. It was eliminated by a single shot from a single human vessel using technology you don't understand and can't defend against. She paused, letting that sink in. This is your only warning. Withdraw all forces from human space immediately. Cancel Treaty 7341 and restore all human territories to their previous status. Submit your leadership for war crimes tribunals. You have 24 hours to begin compliance. The communication channel erupted with outraged responses, threats, demands, promises of retaliation. Cross listened for a moment, then smiled the same cold smile that Ambassador Chen had worn in the Council chambers. Oh, and, Gorthal, she added, knowing the Hegemony leader was listening from his command bunker on the surface. Humanity remembers every insult, every slight, every casual act of cruelty you've inflicted on us over the past 3 centuries. We've been very patient.
We've been very quiet. That patience has now run out. She cut the transmission and turned back to her crew. Status on the other operations? Phase 1 complete across all Council systems, Admiral. The Hive Collective's primary shipyards have been neutralized. The Zephyrian crystal gardens that power their fleet have been adjusted. The Verdeni world ships are experiencing systematic navigation failures. And the ethereal communication networks are suffering from inexplicable quantum interference. Cross nodded with satisfaction.
The gift packages had been more than surveillance devices. They'd been weapons, carefully designed to target each species' specific technological dependencies. The Hive relied on quantum-linked coordination between their drones, links that were now corrupted with human-designed viruses. The Zephyrians depended on crystalline matrices that had been infiltrated with self-replicating nanobots. The Verdeni used biological navigation systems that were now receiving false stellar position data. Admiral, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout Council space, Lieutenant Park announced.
It looks like they're mobilizing everything they have. Estimated combined force is over 50,000 ships.
Let them come, Cross replied calmly.
How many of our people are ready for the next phase?
All stealth ships report ready. The Independence, Justice, Freedom, and Liberty are in position at the remaining primary targets.
Admiral Kim reports the Hidden Fleet is fully deployed and awaiting orders.
The Hidden Fleet was humanity's greatest secret, over 3,000 ships built in asteroid facilities throughout human space, using technologies that made the Council's best vessels look like toys from a primitive civilization. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had trained their entire lives for this moment, individuals who had grown up knowing that someday they would have to fight for their species' right to exist as equals in a hostile galaxy.
Excellent. Signal all commanders to proceed to Phase 2.
It's time to introduce the galaxy to some new concepts, like consequences. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in dozens of star systems.
Human ships appeared without warning, delivered devastating demonstrations of technological superiority, then vanished back into the darkness of space.
Council fleets found their weapons mysteriously malfunctioning, their shields failing at critical moments, their navigation systems leading them into carefully prepared ambushes.
But the humans weren't simply destroying their opponents.
They were being surgical, precise, educational. Each attack was calculated to demonstrate a specific technological advantage, to show the Council species that their assumptions about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong.
On the bridge of the Retribution, Cross watched as intelligence reports flooded in from across the galaxy.
The Collective's homeworld was in chaos as their drones turned on each other, their quantum coordination corrupted by viruses that turned their greatest strength into a weakness.
The Zephyrian fleet was stranded in deep space as their crystal matrices grew cloudy and dim.
The Verdeni worldships were lost in interstellar space, their biological navigation systems feeding them false data that sent them further from their destinations with each course correction. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Ethereal Arbitrator, Lieutenant Park announced. It's marked as an official Council communication.
Put it through.
The holographic display activated, showing the geometric crystal matrix that contained Kelthara's consciousness. The ethereal's energy patterns flickered with what humans had learned to recognize as extreme agitation.
Admiral Cross, I speak for the Galactic Council in demanding an immediate cessation of these terrorist attacks.
Your forces have committed acts of war against sovereign species without provocation or justification.
We demand that you surrender immediately and submit to Council justice.
Cross studied the alien being with the detached interest of a scientist examining an interesting specimen.
Arbitrator Kelthara, I find your choice of words fascinating. Without provocation? Really? After 3 centuries of systematic oppression, you call our response unprovoked?
The Council has acted within established law and precedent laws you wrote to benefit yourselves, Cross interrupted.
Precedents you established to justify your superiority. Did you really believe that a species capable of interstellar travel was too stupid to notice your hypocrisy?
The ethereal's matrix pulsed with indignation. Your species has violated every principle of civilized conduct. You have attacked without declaration of war, used weapons of mass destruction against civilian populations, and threatened the stability of the entire galactic community. Cross laughed, the sound cold and humorless.
Civilian populations?
We've been very careful to avoid civilian casualties, arbitrator. Every target has been military or governmental.
Every attack has been precisely calibrated to demonstrate our capabilities while minimizing loss of life. Can you say the same about your species' actions over the past 3 centuries?
She leaned forward, her expression hardening.
But, since you mentioned declarations of war, allow me to correct that oversight.
As of this moment, the Human Colonial Union formally declares war on the Galactic Council and all member species who continue to support the oppression of humanity.
This war will continue until our demands are met in full. No negotiation. No compromise.
No mercy for those who mistake patience for weakness. You cannot possibly prevail against the combined might of the Council, Kelthara protested.
Our fleets number in the hundreds of thousands. Our technology has been refined over millennia.
Your species has been spacefaring for mere centuries. Cross smiled again, and this time there was something in her expression that made even an energy being recoil. Arbitrator, let me share something with you. Every species in the Council believes they're superior to humanity because you've built your civilizations on stolen technology, conquered territories, and enslaved populations.
You measure strength by the ability to dominate others.
She gestured to the tactical display, where red icons representing Council fleets were winking out across the galaxy as Phase 2 operations continued.
Humanity measures strength differently.
We measure it by the ability to endure, to adapt, to learn from every setback and come back stronger. You've spent 3 centuries teaching us exactly how powerful we needed to become.
Thank you for the education.
The transmission ended as Cross cut the connection. Around her, the bridge crew continued their work with quiet efficiency, monitoring the systematic dismantling of the galaxy's power structure.
Admiral, Phase 2 is proceeding ahead of schedule, Commander Torres reported. Council fleet strength has been reduced by 43%. Their coordination networks are in complete chaos.
And, we're detecting massive civilian unrest on 17 Council member worlds.
Civilian unrest? Yes, ma'am.
It appears that several oppressed species within Council territories have decided this is an opportune time to seek their independence.
The Zephyrian client races are in open rebellion.
The collective subject worlds are refusing to provide resources.
Even some hegemony colony worlds are declaring neutrality.
Cross felt a deep satisfaction settle in her chest. This was what they'd hoped for, not just a military victory, but a complete restructuring of galactic power dynamics. Humanity's war wasn't just about human rights, it was about establishing a new principle that strength came from unity and cooperation, not domination and oppression.
Signal the fleet, she ordered. Proceed to Phase 3.
It's time to show the galaxy what happens when the quiet ones finally decide to speak up. As the Retribution and her escorts folded space around themselves and vanished into hyperspace, heading for their next target, Cross allowed herself a moment of reflection. In 24 hours, humanity had gone from being the galaxy's whipping boys to being its greatest threat. The transformation had been sudden, shocking, and absolute. But this was only the beginning. The Council had pushed too far, and humanity had chosen silence, the kind of silence that preceded the storm.
Ambassador Sarachan stood in the observation deck of the ESV Determination, watching the ancient ethereal homeworld of Luminara through the reinforced transparent aluminum viewport.
The planet hung in space like a crystalline jewel, its surface covered in geometric spires and energy conduits that had been built when most species were still discovering fire. For 50,000 years, the ethereals had considered themselves the wise guardians of galactic civilization, the impartial judges who maintained order among the younger races. Today, that assumption would be tested. Ma'am, Admiral Cross is requesting final authorization for Phase 3, reported Captain Martinez from the bridge communication station.
All human fleets are in position. The Council's remaining forces are completely surrounded.
Sarah nodded, her hands clasped behind her back in unconscious imitation of the Admiral's command posture. Through the viewports, she could see the Council's last desperate gambit, nearly 20,000 ships from every member species, gathered in a final defensive formation around the ethereal homeworld. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, representing the combined military might of civilizations that had ruled space for millennia. It was also exactly where humanity wanted them.
Status on the civilian evacuations? Complete, Ambassador.
We've transported over 40 million non-combatants from potential conflict zones to designated safe areas.
Medical stations are operational. Food and shelter distributions are proceeding on schedule. Sarah smiled with genuine warmth.
Even in the midst of their revolution, humanity had insisted on protecting innocents. Every military target had been preceded by evacuation warnings. Every attack had been designed to minimize civilian casualties. It was an approach that confused many of their enemies, who couldn't understand why a species with such devastating military capabilities would handicap themselves with ethical concerns. They didn't understand that humanity's ethics weren't a weakness, they were the source of their strength.
Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission from the Council flagship, Captain Martinez announced. It's marked as a formal surrender offer. Put it through.
The holographic display activated, revealing not one but 7 figures representing the major Council species.
Arbitrator Kelthera's crystalline matrix flickered with barely contained desperation.
Beside the ethereal, Gorthal's massive form hunched in defeat, his bioluminescent scales dim with exhaustion. The other representatives, insectoid, energy-based, and plant-like beings who had ruled the galaxy for centuries, all showed signs of the devastating week they'd endured.
Ambassador Chen, Kelthera spoke first, the ethereal's voice carrying none of its usual authority. The Council wishes to discuss terms for ending this conflict. We are prepared to negotiate a reasonable settlement that addresses humanity's legitimate concerns.
Sarah studied the assembled alien leadership with the same calm expression she'd maintained throughout their long persecution of her species. These beings had spent 3 centuries treating humans like amusing pets, dismissing their achievements, mocking their culture, and denying them basic rights. Now they wanted to negotiate. "I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation, Arbitrator," Sarah replied coolly.
"This isn't a negotiation. This is surrender.
You have exactly one option available to you: complete and unconditional acceptance of humanity's demands." Gorthal's massive head lifted, his yellow eyes blazing with the last ember of his species' former arrogance. "You cannot seriously expect the combined civilizations of the galaxy to submit to the demands of a single upstart species. We are prepared to offer significant concessions, but total surrender is unacceptable."
Sarah's smile never wavered. "Admiral Cross, please provide Representative Gorthal with a demonstration of our current tactical position." The holographic display shifted to show a tactical overview of the Luminara system.
The Council fleet hung in space around the ethereal homeworld, 20,000 ships in defensive formation. But, as the display updated with real-time intelligence, new contacts began appearing, human vessels decloaking throughout the system, their positions revealing the stunning reality of the situation.
The Council fleet wasn't surrounding Luminara. They were surrounded by humanity.
"My God," whispered Vexed Eye, the Hive Collective representative.
"How many ships do you have?" "Enough," Sarah replied simply. "Admiral Cross, please share the full scope of our deployment."
The tactical display expanded, showing not just the Luminara system but the entire local galactic region. Red dots representing human forces appeared everywhere, in every Council home system, around every major population center, positioned at every critical resource point and trade route.
The scope of humanity's hidden military buildup was staggering, representing decades of secret construction and strategic positioning. For 97 years, Sarah explained, humanity has been preparing for this moment.
Every insult you delivered funded another shipyard.
Every act of oppression authorized another research facility.
Every casual demonstration of your superiority motivated another generation of human engineers, scientists, and military officers to prove you wrong.
The alien representatives stared in stunned silence at the display.
The mathematical reality was undeniable. Humanity had not only achieved technological superiority, they had done so while maintaining the largest covert military operation in galactic history.
This is impossible, Kelthara protested. Our intelligence networks would have detected such massive construction efforts.
Our monitoring stations would have. Your monitoring stations have been under our control for 43 years, Sarah interrupted. Your intelligence networks have been feeding you carefully crafted information designed to maintain your illusions of superiority. Your trade systems have been infiltrated by our nanotechnology. Your communication networks have been compromised by our artificial intelligences. She gestured to the tactical display, where the true extent of humanity's preparation was now visible.
Every gift we gave you contained surveillance devices. Every cultural exchange included intelligence operatives.
Every trade agreement allowed us to place assets throughout your territories. You were so convinced of your superiority that you never bothered to scan the presence from your primitive neighbors. Captain Martinez stepped forward with a datapad.
Ma'am, we're receiving reports from the other systems.
The Hegemony Council has voted to accept our terms.
The Hive Collective Queens are requesting formal audience. The Zephyrian houses are prepared to surrender their warships. The Verdani Eldest Circle is offering unconditional submission.
Sarah nodded, her attention returning to the council representatives. Your member species are considerably more practical than their leadership, it seems. They recognize that continuing this conflict would result in their complete destruction.
What do you want?
Gorthal asked, his voice heavy with defeat.
What are your terms?
The same terms we offered 72 hours ago, Sarah replied.
Complete reversal of Treaty 7341. Restoration of all human territories and rights.
Resignation of the current council leadership and submission to war crimes tribunals.
But now we have additional requirements.
She gestured, and Captain Martinez activated a new display showing a comprehensive restructuring plan for galactic governance. The Galactic Council will be dissolved and replaced with the Galactic Federation, a truly democratic organization where each species has representation proportional to their population, not their military strength. The Federation will be governed by principles of individual rights, cultural preservation, and mutual cooperation rather than domination.
The alien representatives studied the proposed structure with growing alarm.
Under the new system, humanity's large population and rapid expansion would give them significant influence, while the traditional power brokers would find themselves reduced to minority status. Furthermore, Sarah continued, all species currently oppressed by council members will be granted immediate independence and membership in the new federation.
The Zephyrian client races, the collective subject worlds, the hegemony slave species all will have the right to self-determination.
This is not justice, Vextai protested.
This is revenge disguised as reform.
You're using your military advantage to impose your cultural values on species that have governed themselves for millennia.
Sarah's expression hardened. Did you offer us justice when you stripped away our colonies? Did you show mercy when you imposed reproductive quotas on human populations? Did you demonstrate cultural sensitivity when you called us primitive meatsacks unworthy of basic rights?
She stepped closer to the holographic display, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of accumulated grievances.
For 300 years, you've treated humanity as an inferior species fit only to serve your interests.
You've mocked our values, stolen our achievements, and oppressed our people. You did all of this because you believed yourselves superior and us incapable of effective resistance. The viewport behind her showed the human fleet, thousands of ships representing technology and military capability that exceeded anything the Council had ever imagined possible.
We are not superior to you because we can destroy your fleets, Sarah continued. We are superior to you because we choose not to.
Every weapon system we've deployed has been calibrated to minimize casualties. Every attack has been precisely targeted to avoid civilian populations. Every demonstration has been designed to achieve military objectives while preserving as much life as possible.
She paused, letting that sink in.
That is the difference between our species and yours. You believed strength came from the ability to dominate others. We understand that true strength comes from the wisdom to show mercy to those who showed us none. Arbitrator Kelthara's crystalline matrix flickered with what might have been recognition.
You could have simply destroyed us all.
Yes, Sarah confirmed.
We could have. The technology exists. The capabilities are deployed.
If we had chosen the path of genocide, none of your species would survive the next hour.
But that would make us no better than you.
The silence stretched for long moments as the alien representatives contemplated the magnitude of both humanity's military power and their restraint in using it.
We accept your terms, Kelthara finally said. The Galactic Council formally surrenders to the Human Colonial Union.
We will implement the governmental changes you've outlined and submit our leadership for the tribunals you've requested.
Excellent, Sarah replied. Admiral Cross will provide you with detailed implementation schedules. The transition to Federation governance will begin immediately.
Your fleets will stand down and return to their home systems under human escort.
What happens to us? Gorthal asked quietly. To the former council leadership? That will be determined by the tribunals, Sarah answered. If you're found guilty of crimes against sentient beings, you'll face appropriate punishment.
If you cooperate fully with the transition process and demonstrate genuine commitment to the new Federation principles, you may find that humanity's concept of justice includes the possibility of redemption.
The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with Captain Martinez on the observation deck.
Outside, the massive council fleet was already beginning to stand down, their weapons powering offline as their commanders accepted the new reality.
Ma'am, Captain Martinez said softly, was it worth it?
All those years of preparation, all the secrecy and sacrifice? Sarah watched as human ships began moving among the former enemy fleet, their crews already working to establish peaceful contact and begin the complex process of galactic reorganization. Captain, 3 days ago a human child on New Terra was told by their Zephyrian teacher that humans were intellectually inferior and would never amount to more than manual laborers in galactic society. Today, that same child lives in a galaxy where such statements are recognized as the bigoted lies they always were. She turned from the viewport, her expression peaceful for the first time in decades.
Ask me in 100 years if it was worth it.
When former council species are working alongside humans as equals in the Federation.
When young beings of every species grow up believing that cooperation is stronger than domination.
When the galaxy has learned that the quiet ones are usually the most dangerous not because they're weak, but because they're wise enough to choose their battles carefully.
Captain Martinez smiled. And if they forget that lesson? Sarah's answering smile carried an edge that would have made even Admiral Cross proud.
Then, they'll discover that humanity is very, very good at being patient. And even better at reminding the galaxy why that patience should never be mistaken for weakness.
Across the Luminara system, human ships began the long process of escorting former enemy fleets back to their home systems.
But it wasn't an occupation or a conquest, it was the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization built not on the dominance of the strong over the weak, but on the revolutionary concept that all sentient beings deserved equal rights and equal respect. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far, and humanity had chosen silence. But that silence had been the prelude to something far more dangerous than war, it had been the prelude to justice. And, in the years that followed, as the Galactic Federation grew and prospered under principles of cooperation rather than domination, other species would learn a fundamental truth about their human neighbors. The quiet ones weren't quiet because they were weak or frightened or inferior. They were quiet because they were listening, learning, and preparing. And, when they finally chose to speak, the galaxy had no choice but to listen in return.
The age of council domination was over.
The age of Federation cooperation had begun. And it had all started with a smile that never wavered and a choice to remain silent until the moment came to change everything.